Ken Levine is an Emmy Award-winning screenwriter, director, and producer. You will have enjoyed his work on Cheers, Frasier, on other shows like Dharma and Greg, even The Simpsons. He's been involved in a couple of movies. He's an author. He writes a great blog and a fantastic podcast called Hollywood Levine. Welcome, Ken Levine, to the Pod 20 on Podcast Radio.
Oh, thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Now, I mentioned all the things you do. How do you describe yourself?
You know, I'm kind of, I guess, a writer more than anything else, because even when I do other things, including Major League Baseball play-by-play, I'm still writing. During the course of the season, I would write scripts and send them in, or I wrote a book, a diary about one of my years doing Major League Baseball. So writing seems to be something that is part of my DNA.
Are writers happy people? I say that because
no, usually they're not. I'm one of the happier people. We're all neurotic as hell, but no, I am not one of those people though that believes in order to be a successful writer, you have to come from a horribly dysfunctional family and there has to be 17 tragedies in your life. No, I don't believe in that, you know. And if it's a trade-off of you can live a miserable life, but your work will last for another 400 years, or have a really great life and your shows might rerun once or twice in the summer, I'll take the latter.
Okay. So where did you grow up? What is your background?
I grew up in the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles. I grew up in the 60s, the very turbulent 60s. And that was a wild, interesting time to grow up here because, well, first of all, being part of the baby boomer generation, 76 million of us, and everyone catered to us. All of the TV shows, the radio, the music, the advertising, everything catered to us. And it was a period of, in California, the whole California dream, where everybody's out surfing and we're all at the beach. And then came the mid 60s and great music and the Sunset Strip. And like I said, it was just a great time to grow up in Los Angeles. If it weren't for the Vietnam War or the fact that I was miserable in high school, it would have just been idyllic.
So what did you want to be when you left school?
Well, I didn't know for sure, but I knew a couple of things. Number one, you know, I noticed in school you had to take all of these required courses like math and history and English and science and all these courses that you hated. And then you could take like one elective. It'd be art or music or drama, whatever that was. You could take one fun elective. And I thought to myself, you know, when I get out in the real world and I have to pick a job for myself, why not pick an elective? So I knew I wanted to do that. And then there were like a couple of areas. From the time I was 8 years old, I wanted to be a Major League Baseball announcer. And also, I saw the Dick Van Dyke Show, which came on in the early 60s. And it was a revelation to me because here I was, this nerdy kid, and I was kind of funny. That was really sort of the only thing I had going for myself. And here suddenly is this show where this gorgeous girl, Laura Petrie, is married to a comedy writer. And I thought, wow, you mean I could get a Laura Petrie without having to throw a football? This is fantastic. So I always figured, find a way of doing comedy somewhere. And initially I got into radio. I was very big into radio. I was a top 40 disc jockey, spinning the hits.
You mentioned your crush on Laura Petrie, played by Mary Tyler Moore.
Mm-hmm.
You worked for MTM at one stage. I don't think you worked on the Mary Tyler Moore Show, but you did work.
My partner David Isaacs and I created a comeback series for her in 1985 called Mary, and it was a rugged experience.
Really? Why?
Well, Mary was going through a real transition in her life, and I think she kind of got talked into doing a TV series, and I don't think that's really where her head was at. And so we kind of struggled a little bit. We got great reviews, and we got decent ratings. Part of the problem is the pilot came out really well. So well that CBS thought this is going to be our answer to Cosby. And so they were telling Mary that when this show premieres, it's going to get 40 shares, which is insane. And when the show premiered to only a 26 share, and we were up against like the #1 show in the country at the time, we still got a 26 share, Mary was very disheartened from that, and unrealistic expectations. But again, I'm very proud of that show. I posted a few episodes up on YouTube if anybody wants to see them. And we discovered Katie Sagal. We gave Katie Sagal her first job in television. And we had James Ferrantino, who was terrific, John Aston, who was hilarious. So the show lasted only 1 year, but I'm very proud of it.
Was it at that time that Mary Tyler Moore came round for dinner at your place and revealed a story about the old Dick Van Dyke Show when there were single beds on the set?
Yes. Am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
Of course.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, we had Mary over for dinner one night, and my wife was in the kitchen preparing hors d'oeuvres and getting the wine ready, and I'm just sitting in the living room with Mary.
And Dick Van Dyke's character was called Rob, we should say.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It was Rob and Laura Petrie.
Yeah.
And Mary talked about how in those days CBS required that they had separate twin beds. And she says to me, and again, you have to imagine this is Mary Tyler Moore, so it's coming out of Laura Petrie's mouth. It's her voice going, well, when am I going to fuck Rob? So that was sort of a surreal moment.
I bet it was.
Yeah.
So yeah. I wonder if that's it then. If you only became a comedy writer because you wanted to get Laura Petrie, that really was it.
Oh, look, Graham. That's why 99% of the comedy writers get into the field. Okay. Don't kid yourself. Don't kid yourself. Yeah, it's like I wasn't a jock. I didn't play music. Back in those days, if you just held a guitar in your hand, you were 10% more attractive to a woman. I couldn't play a guitar, so I had comedy, and I tried to use it to my benefit. Although I look back at my high school yearbooks, and all of these really pretty girls say, oh God, it was so much fun to be in class with you. And oh, you were so funny. And I don't think I could have gotten through trigonometry without you sitting next to me and everything, but they never went out with me. Right. At the end of the day, it's like they all say, oh, we want a sense of humor. No, they want the good looking Brad Pitt guy.
So how did you get into comedy writing, and what was the sequence there? Were you in radio first and then?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So
I
were a disc jockey
from UCLA.
Yeah.
I was a disc jockey. I was a top 40 disc jockey in, oh my God, Bakersfield, San Bernardino, Detroit, New York, Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, one time in Chicago. And I just got tired of playing Kung Fu fighting 4 times a night. And I just reached a point where I thought to myself, is this really how I want to spend the rest of my life? Just playing Oh Pretty Woman by Roy Orbison? until I'm 75. So I happened to see, it had just come out, the Woody Allen movie Sleeper. And it was like a huge epiphany, because I'm thinking, here is this guy, and he's doing sight gags and verbal gags, and he's got a story going, and there's a whole audience of people laughing. If you go to the theater, you can actually hear people laugh. When you're on radio, you never hear the laugh.
Yeah.
You just never hear the laugh. You have no idea whether your jokes land or not. And I thought, okay, this is what I want to do. But I had no training in writing whatsoever. And I was also at that time in an Army Reserve unit. I was in an Armed Forces Radio Reserve unit. In case we got called up, it was Good Morning Vietnam. But I met another guy in that unit named David Isaacs, and David was reading the biography of George S. Kaufman, the Howard Teichman biography. George S. Kaufman was one of my idols, because I would study comedy writers who I admired, like Neil Simon, like Kaufman and Hart, like Carl Reiner, people
Mel Brooks,
like that. Mel, oh my God, an idol, an absolute idol. So the fact that, first of all, it's not often that you see somebody on an Army base reading a book, but the fact that it was this book in particular, we started talking, and he too had a desire to be a comedy writer, and he too had no experience whatsoever. At the time, he was working at ABC in Hollywood in the long since obsolete film department, where he would ship 35 millimeter and 16 millimeter copies of shows to Hawaii and to different affiliates that weren't on the satellite. So that was his job. And I was doing 6 to midnight in San Bernardino. So we're in summer camp, and we talked about, gee, it would be fun to try writing something sometime. And then I went home after summer camp, and the radio station got sold to new owners who decided to change the format, so I got fired. This is not the first time that has happened to me in radio. In fact, it was the norm.
Yeah,
so,
it still is, to just quietly.
There's no security.
No.
There's more security in, chalk paintings on sidewalks. But I went back to LA to live with my parents while I sent around tapes trying to get the next radio job. And I called David and I said, hey, I want to try writing a script. You want to write one with me? And we got together and talked about it and decided to try being partners. And we had an idea to write a pilot about 2 college kids, because we were 23 years old. That was the sum total of our life experience. So we wrote this pilot. We had no idea what we were doing. We didn't know from outline, story structure, nothing. We wrote this thing. I had to go to, there's a bookstore in Hollywood that, most remainder tables will have books that you can buy for $2 a book. Well, this one had scripts, a TV script. So for $2, I was able to buy an Odd Couple script and a Mary Tyler Moore script. And I took those home and I looked at them and like, oh, interior Madison apartment day. That was the format. I didn't even know what the format was. So we're writing this, and the way we worked was that David would write it in longhand since he couldn't type. And then I would type up the final script. So David is writing in a binder, and we're working and working and working. And finally one day I turned to him and I said, what page do you think we're on? And he goes, I don't know, about 35, 36. And I looked at the script and I said, they start wrapping it up here pretty quick. So we took 10 minutes, came up with an ending, which probably would have cost $50 million in 1973 money. And we wrote it took us about a half an hour to write our wild, crazy ending. And the end, we went out to a Mexican restaurant and had margaritas. We were officially writers. And it might shock you to learn that that script did not sell anywhere. And I had...
What was it about?
Yeah, well, you know what? I still don't know. Like I said, two college kids who shared a dorm, like Woody Allen and Robert Redford as roommates. So, but at the end of the day, our takeaway was that we enjoyed writing it and we enjoyed working with each other. So then, I know this is a long answer to your question. So then I came across an actual TV writer who said, well, in order to break in, you have to write a spec script from an existing show that's on the air. And a spec script means just a sample script that you write for free. So the show that David and I really admired the most was the Mary Tyler Moore Show. This was the early 70s. It was 1973. And there were no real books on TV comedy writing. Neither of us had taken any courses in it to speak of. So what we decided to do was every Saturday night when the Mary Tyler Moore Show was on, I would hold the microphone up to the speaker. We had a little cassette recorder and we made an audio recording of the episode. Then we would go back, listen to it, and write an outline based on the show. And we did that week after week after week. And then we started comparing them and seeing the patterns and figuring out exactly what kind of stories they told and how they told them and various things like that. And then we set off and wrote our spec episode of the Mary Tyler Moore Show. And so to this day, I say, the fact that I didn't have a girlfriend and I had nowhere to go on Saturday night, it allowed me to have a writing career.
Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. If I was getting late on Saturday night, like, I don't know what I'd be doing today. I'd be playing Kung Fu Fighting on Radio Caroline.
Right. So how did that then, did you get the gig, the spec script, did you get that with Mary Tyler Moore Show?
Oh, no, they hated it.
Okay.
But we decided we're going to take 2 years and we are going to just keep writing script after script after script, and figured that sometime in a 2-year period, somebody is going to recognize our talent. And we were very lucky because it only took 6 months. And the story editor of the Jeffersons, which really had just premiered only a few weeks before, he read our Mary Tyler Moore Show and really liked it and invited us to come in and pitch an episode of the Jeffersons. And that we sold. And so that was our first assignment. Who better than a couple of, white Jewish kids writing the episodes of the Jeffersons? But that was our entry into the business. And a funny story, Graham, we worked out the outline with the producers, and then the producers sent us off to write the script and gave us 2 weeks to write the script, which is plenty of time. The only problem was that was the 2-week window that we had to go on active duty for our Army Reserve summer camp. And it's not like jury duty, where you can just write in and say, you know what, it's kind of inconvenient for me at this time. I'll go in October. It's like, no, you report or the military police throw you in jail. So David and I had to go to Fort Ord, California for the 2-week period that we had to write the Jeffersons, and we would write it at night in the barracks. And the barracks were just as you've always seen in movies like Full Metal Jacket, where there are these giant cavernous rooms with 80 bunk beds all lined up. So if you can picture the scene where these guys are playing cards, they're smoking dope, they're listening to Jimi Hendrix records, and David and I are sitting on a bunk in the corner going, Wheezy, you come over here a minute. And that's how we wrote our first script. And we needed a typewriter, which, you know, you can't fit in your duffel bag. So we one night broke into an office and we used their typewriter, and we typed the script. And so that was our first assignment.
So was MASH your first long-running job, or was there another one before that?
No, I guess our first staff assignment was on the Tony Randall show.
Okay.
Which was for MTM.
Yeah.
And it's a funny Tony Randall story that people in England will appreciate. So we write a script freelance for the Tony Randall show, and they liked it so much that they invited us to join the staff, which was great.
Yeah. You know? And this is your first staff job.
This is our first staff job.
See, now you're moving.
MTM, yeah. It's Camelot. This is fantastic. And we're writing for Tony Randall. Oh my God.
Yeah.
So the first day we come on the stage, the cast gathers together to have a table reading where they all read the script out loud. And there had just been a 1-week hiatus prior to this. And they're doing our script. So cast is sitting around the table, and the writers, we're all sitting around the table. And Tony says, before I start, I'd like to say something. During the hiatus week, I went to London. And while in London, I got a chance to watch some of the British sitcoms of the day. And after watching those, I can say conclusively that the stuff we do here in America is shit. Okay, now let's read The Tony Randall Show by Ken Levine and David Isaacs. Yeah.
Right. So how did you go from that to MASH then?
Well,
because you joined when it was already a big show, didn't you?
Yeah. We did our first script when MASH was in its 5th season. We were very lucky that our agent moved over to an agency. So much of this was good fortune. She moved over to an agency that also included Gene Reynolds, who was the showrunner of MASH. And Larry Gelbart had just left after 4 seasons. And so Gene was looking for new writers. And so our agent recommended us. He read our script and liked it and invited us to come in and pitch MASH. And we did. I should backtrack a second and say, when we were on the Jeffersons, they gave us ground rules in pitching. They said, you can come in with 3 ideas, because they had a lot of freelance writers coming in with ideas. You can come in with 3 ideas only. Okay. So we met with Gene Reynolds and we said, so how many ideas can we come in with? And he said, I don't know, come in with as many good ideas as you have. We said, okay. We went away for a week and we called and we said, we have some ideas we'd like to come in and pitch. And he said, okay, great. So we walked in and we had 50 ideas for MASH stories.
Wow.
There was no way we were going to leave that office without getting a MASH assignment.
Yeah.
And after 10, he went like, oh, no, okay, that's fine. I'll take 3 and 8 and we can marry the 2. And the main story was the gas heater blows up and Hawkeye is temporarily blind.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Big
and
episode.
Gene said, thank you. Gene said, you know, my reservation about this is you guys are fairly new. Have you ever done drama? And both of us lied our asses off and said, oh, God, yeah, in college, just, you know, Tennessee Williams plays we would write. Oh, Eugene O'Neill. Absolutely. So he gave us the assignment. And, boy, we slaved away at that assignment. And we reached a point, it was like late in the 2nd act of the show, where we said, you know what, there's no place in the script where Hawkeye expresses what he's going through. I mean, he puts up a good front and he's very funny, and there's a very, very funny scene in the operating room, et cetera, in the mess tent. But there's not a scene where he really gets down and expresses what it is like for him being in this situation. So we decided to write a speech. And we thought, you know what, this isn't veering off the outline. This is just an addition. And if they don't like the speech, they can just cut it. No harm, no foul. So we took like 3 days to write and shape this speech. So many cocktail napkins and things, because we'd be at a restaurant and we would come up with an idea for a line and we would write it on a napkin, and we would just change this over and over and over again until we finally got it to where we were happy with it. And we turned in the script and they were blown away by the speech. The fact that A, we took the initiative, and B, it was a good speech. They were absolutely thrilled. And the speech that Alan delivers on the show is word for word our first draft of that speech. So I'm incredibly proud of that. But after we turned in that show, then Gene just kept feeding us more episodes to write that year. We got on the Tony Randall show that year, and we were like moonlighting, writing writing MASH episodes on the weekends at night. And then at the end of the season, we were offered the chance to go on staff of MASH. Wow. And I think it was a wise decision on our part.
Yeah.
Looking back, yeah.
Yeah, for a writer to get on that show at that time. Wow.
Yeah.
When I spoke to Alan Alda on this program, he was talking about some of the censorship issues that they had to deal with on MASH. And I mentioned a story that I'd heard on Hollywood and Vine that you'd mentioned about Radar being asked to take a visiting general, I think it was, to the VIP tent.
Right, to the VIP tent, yeah. Yeah. And we said, right this way, your VIPness, VIP written out, and then NESS, and that they flagged.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you came up against that you think should have gone on but didn't, or just a silly censorship story?
We had a big fight with them once over Potter saying, I'm too old for this crap.
Really?
Yeah, we got a big fight, and we won that one.
Yeah?
It was a knockdown, drag-out battle, but we won that. And then years later, it's like on Everybody Loves Raymond, Peter Boyle has a line like, oh, crap, or whatever it is. It's like a catchphrase. You could put it on T-shirts.
Yeah.
But back in those days, we couldn't do that. And they would always say to us, whenever they received a script, cut the casual profanity in half.
Right.
So if there were 8 hells and damns that we wanted in the script, we put in 16.
Right.
I mean, it was just this silly game that we would play with the censors. But by and large, I would say, look, we weren't, a very suggestive show. We weren't trying to slip in a lot of double entendres. We weren't very salacious. It wasn't like Three's Company or something, where, we're really kind of living and dying by, being lascivious. So it really wasn't that big of an issue. I mean, boy, when you look at CBS then and you look at the level of interference now that goes on, I mean, it's just staggering. Back in those days, all we had to do was send CBS like a log line to what the episode was going to be. Hawkeye has claustrophobia and they have to evacuate and go in a cave. Something that's all we would say.
Yeah.
And we would fall behind on those, and they would call and say, please get us caught up. But we were giving log lines on episodes that we had filmed.
Right.
Okay.
Just
So
more
it's not
efficient
like
that
they
way.
could come back and go, no, we don't approve this show. They filmed it. It's in the can. You know, it airs Monday night. Enjoy it.
So did that lead directly on to Cheers then when MASH wound up?
No. From there, we had a couple of development deals, which meant back then a studio would pay you a lot of money to be exclusive to them, and you could only write pilots for them. If they had series, you could only write series for them. We did that for a few years. We had one pilot that got produced but didn't get on the air. We lost out to something called Pink Lady and Jeff. And then we had another couple of pilots that we were paid for but didn't get made. And then I got a call from James Burrows, and Jimmy had been one of the directors of the Tony Randall Show. So we knew Jim through Tony, and he called and said, I'm partnering up with the Charles brothers, and we have a series. Would you guys like to produce it with us? And my first thought was, well, we're creating our own shows. What do we need to go back and do someone else's? But we said, as a courtesy to Jimmy, sure, send us the script. And we read the script and we said, this is fantastic. The Charles brothers are great. You bet we want to be a part of this. So we signed aboard and produced the first year of Cheers. And it's interesting because now writing staffs have grown and swelled in number. Back in those days, that first year of Cheers, the writing staff was Glenn Charles, Les Charles, David Isaacs, and me. And one day a week we had Jerry Belson for Punch Up, and another day we had David Lloyd. And otherwise, it was just the four of us and various writers, some freelance people, and we wrote 5 episodes ourselves, and Glenn and Les wrote like 4 or 5. And so that first year of Cheers, which, you know, not to sound too immodest, but I think is the best year of the series, not so much because of us, but because of Sam and Diane. And I think the first year of Cheers is the best year of the 11-year run.
And was it while you were working on Cheers that you decided, okay, I want to be a baseball announcer now?
We had, yes.
So how do you fit that in?
we had left Cheers to do the Mary Tyler Moore Show in 1985. And after that was over, midlife crisis, I thought to myself, you know what? If I don't pursue this now, I never will. And I had a friend in college who did go the baseball announcing route and went through the minor leagues and wound up as one of the voices of the San Francisco Giants, Dave Glass. And I went to a Dodger Giant game, and there's Dave sitting up there in the booth right next to Vince Scully of the Dodgers. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to give this a try. So I got a tape recorder and I went to the upper deck of Dodger Stadium and just started broadcasting games. Meanwhile,
well, just into the tape recorder.
Yeah, in my tape recorder. Meanwhile, I'm now back at Cheers. I'm consulting on Cheers, and David and I are writing on Cheers. David and I wound up writing 40 episodes of Cheers during the run. And after a couple of years of that, I sent tapes to some minor league teams. You know, I convinced my saintly wife, wouldn't it be fun to spend a bucolic summer somewhere? And she said, like, okay. And I said, here's a list of all the minor league cities. It's like 125 of them. I said, you pick out only the places that you would like to go, and those are the only places I'll send my tape. And she checked off like 20. I was hoping she'd check off like 64. She checked off 20, and I got 3 offers, including Syracuse, which is the AAA affiliate, the top minor league club of the Toronto Blue Jays. So we took that, but my wife was under the impression that Syracuse was more like the Berkshires. It'd be more like Tanglewood and, you know, a lot of artists and theater, and it's salt mines and the GE factory and the
it's the opposite coast as well.
What?
It's the opposite coast too.
Yeah, well, she's from New York, so she didn't mind the opposite coast. Right. Yeah, she preferred the opposite coast. She still does. So after a year of Syracuse, my wife basically said, look, if you have an affair, we can go to counseling and maybe work it out. If you want to go back to Syracuse, we're getting divorced. So from there, I moved to Tidewater, which is the Mets AAA affiliate, and that was Virginia Beach, which was a resort. And that I was able to sell as San Diego with humidity.
Right.
And did that for a couple of years. And there was an opening with the Baltimore Orioles. And to make a long story short, I sent in my tape and I got the job.
And it's that easy? You send in your tape you put together like a greatest hits or something?
No, 94 people sent in their tapes.
Wow.
Yeah. No.
So you send them all your best stuff, all the home runs and everything?
I send like a half inning, an exciting half inning. And I had met John Miller, who was the voice of the Orioles, when at the end of the season, I was in Anaheim, still recording more sample games. And I gave him one just to listen to. I said, would you listen to this and critique it for me? And he said, sure. And I gave him the tape and had my phone number on it. And then like a few weeks later, I get a call. And it's John Miller. And he said, there's an opening with the Orioles. I listened to your tape. You're terrific. Why don't you send the tape? So I was like, okay. So I did. I sent a tape to the radio station, to WBAL. And I spoke to the program director. And he said, so what are you sending me? And I said, an exciting half inning of Angel baseball. And he said, okay, send me that, but also send me 3 uninterrupted, complete innings where nothing happens.
Right, because that's where you earn your money.
And I okay. So I did. And I was a finalist, and they flew me out to Baltimore. And I met with John and met with all of the people at the radio station. And they said, okay, great. We'll let you know in a week. And a week went by and I heard nothing. And, you know, by day 9, 10, it's like, okay, shit, I didn't get it. Oh, well, we got a free trip to Baltimore out of it. And then like another few days later, I got the call. And when I got the call then, I thought, oh, okay, this is the courtesy call because it's been 2 weeks. So they're saying we went another way, but thank you. And we enjoyed your tape and we enjoyed meeting you and best of luck to you. When they called and said, we're prepared to offer you the job, I was like floored.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's big time. Yeah.
Yeah, really. That's the major leagues.
And when you're calling a baseball game, who are you imagining you're calling it for? Like a hardened sports nut, like a mega fan of the team?
It's really a good question, Graham. And the answer is no. I picture somebody, I think, very different than any other baseball announcer I know. I picture a 35-year-old woman listening.
Really?
Yes. See, I figure the hardened baseball fan is going to listen to you no matter what you do. Okay?
Yeah.
They don't care.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if they hate you, they're still going to listen. They don't care.
Yeah.
They want to hear the ball game. But women, so I picture a 35-year-old woman. She sort of knows the game, but doesn't know really the fine points. Okay? So I don't have to like explain to her what a pitching change is or what a bunt is, but I do have to explain to her sacrifice fly and the infield fly rule and various other strategies that go on in a baseball game. I have to explain to her the difference between hit and run and hit. So, I use that as a yardstick. And the other thing that I do, because I really see baseball as a story, and I see my job as an announcer, not just reporting balls and strikes, but telling you a story for 3 hours. And stories unfold emotionally. And these are real human beings playing this game. And they all have their desires, they all have their frustrations, their insecurity. There's all the issues of the import of this particular game, or how important it is to a player to do well in this game. Otherwise, he's going to be sent back down to the minors. And so I really wanted to focus on the personalities of the players and make sure that the players were real living human beings and not just bobbleheads to people. And women tend to respond more to emotional stories than men. I so believe. You may get letters. So that's what I did. I imagined that I was broadcasting to a 35-year-old, housewife, mother of a couple of young kids, maybe has a job, goes to 2 or 3 actual games a year. But if I can hook her and I can make the game interesting to her, then I think it can be interesting to everybody. And after Baltimore, I went to Seattle. We had terrible teams in Seattle. And we had terrible teams in Baltimore when I was there too. My lifetime record in the major leagues is like 36 and 784. But when we're on the road and we're playing a night game, when I'm with the Seattle Mariners and we're playing a night game on the East Coast in Boston or New York or Toronto or Detroit, well, that game is coming on at 4:30 in the afternoon, right during rush hour traffic in Seattle. And if the Mariners are losing 7-0 in the 3rd inning against Cleveland, why the hell is anybody going to be listening to that game unless I make it entertaining?
Yeah.
Unless I find things to do, unless I use my humor, unless I tell stories, talk about baseball history, anything I can to make the game interesting, because I realize that this is prime drive time, radio.
Entertainment, yeah.
And I have a captive audience.
Yeah.
Okay, they can't just turn me off. They can turn away to something else. But if they're stuck in the car and I'm entertaining them and the time is going by quickly for them, then they're going to stick with me. They don't care if it's 7-0 Cleveland.
So as you said earlier, it's all about writing. That's what it is. That's what the gig is. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
People say, what's the difference between telling a story at a baseball game and telling a story when I'm writing? And the answer is quite simply that in baseball, I can't rewrite the ending. Okay, I have to go with what it is.
Now you've worked on a few movies as well, and you were you involved with an early Tom Hanks film. I think quite a good film, Volunteers. My wife and I went to see that when we were dating, actually. So thank you for that. That was one we saw in Whangarei, New Zealand, at the Odeon. And I still think it was quite a good film. What was that? Tom Candy was in that as well. What was that experience
John Candy
like?
was in that.
Yeah.
Well, producer came to us, Walter Parks, in like 1980, and this is a typical saga of a movie. He came to us in 1980 and had this basic idea of a preppy asshole from Yale who, to escape a gambling debt, takes his roommate's place on the Peace Corps charter and winds up in the Peace Corps in Thailand. And we said, okay, now what? And then we constructed stories, and then the story changed, and we figured, okay, well, let's do a thing where they have to build a bridge, like a bridge on the River Kwai type of an ending. And we find out that, it was all engineered by the communists and they had to blow up the bridge. That's fine. So we had the first 20 pages getting them there, and we had the last 20 pages blowing up the bridge. But then it's like, well, what happens like the next 70 pages in the middle? And we went around draft after draft after draft, and it went through studio after studio after studio, and it went through several directors. When we wrote the first draft, they said to us, who do you think would be great to play the part of Lawrence Bourne III? And we wrote it originally for Bill Murray. We thought Bill Murray would be good, although he was kind of aging out at that point. And we said, well, there's a guy on this sitcom on ABC, Tom Hanks, and he's like really good, and I think he'd be great for this. And they said, no one's going to make a movie with the number 2 lead of Bosom Buddies, a number 40 show in the ratings. But we're with the same agency as Tom. We were with William Morris at the time. And they got Tom a copy of the script just for, fun. And he read it and really loved it. But of course, no one was going to make a movie with him. So now you flash forward, and it's 1985. Tom has done a couple of movies, including Splash.
Yeah.
And Splash was just that.
Yeah.
And he was suddenly the flavor of the month in Hollywood. And he was being offered every comedy in town, and he was getting just these giant stacks of scripts. And he was reading them, and he just, no. And he said to his agent, there was a screenplay I read like 5-6 years ago about a guy in the Peace Corps. That was really funny. I remember really liking it. Can you get that script? And the agent said, well, that's kind of like finding a needle in a haystack, but I'll see what I can do. Okay, now this is the God's honest truth. That day, that very day, movie had been set up with TriStar HBO Films. And again, we said, Tom Hanks would be great. So our producer calls the agent. This is like an hour after his conversation with Tom. And producer calls and says, hi, I've got a script I'd love Tom to consider. It's about a guy who welches on a gambling debt and joins the Peace Corps. And the agent said, here's his address, messenger it to him. And I'm sure then the agent called Tom and went, okay, I found it. But so the script went to Tom at 5:30. And he picked up the script and he opened it to the middle, and there was a Margaret Dumont joke in it that he remembered. And he saw the Margaret Dumont joke and he went, this is the script. So he got the script at 5:30, and I got a call at like 6:15 from our producer saying, Tom is in.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It was that fortuitous. And of course, on that movie, that's where he met Rita Wilson, and they're still married to this day. So I guess Tom and Rita, and you and your wife.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, you made the connection, which is great. Thank you very much for that, Ken. I've got another great story there. Yeah.
Yeah. But interestingly, at the time we saw the movie, all I could see was the faults. And there's shifts in tone and certain battles that we had with the director that we lost, certain things that really I find kind of cringeworthy. But like a lot of it worked. And interestingly, about a year ago, sitting at home and I have nothing to do, and I said, all right, let me go through my library and watch a movie. And I came across Volunteers, and I had, I haven't actually watched this in years and years. And I know it shows up all the time on HBO and various channels. It does really well in the ratings. Thank you to whoever watches it. So I put it on. I figured, you know what, I can always turn this off at any point. I know it happens. And I wound up watching the whole movie, and I like it so much better now than I did then.
You're too close to it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, exactly. And maybe in comparison to what is considered a comedy now, but it was very smart, and it had a story, and it moved along, and it had a romance, and it's filled with a lot of funny lines that come out of character. I mean, there are a couple of lines now with today's sensitivity that I would remove.
Yeah.
that I'm not proud of. But again, we wrote that 35 years ago, and so yeah, I'm proud of Volunteers.
And since then, along the way, you've mainly worked in sitcoms. I mean, there's Frasier, Wings, Dharma and Greg, Everybody Loves Raymond. Take us behind the scenes then for a writer and director, which you've done a lot of that too, of making one of these shows. Do you shoot them twice? Is that right?
No.
So
we
let me in. How does it work getting one of these shows to air?
Well, let me say that our shows were not filmed twice, but all of the Norman Lear shows that were on tape, like All in the Family and The Jeffersons, One Day at a Time, Good Times, Maude, those were filmed twice. They would do a 5:30 taping, and then they would do an 8 o'clock taping, and then they would just use the best takes. Shows that were done on film was expensive. So we didn't have the luxury of doing that. The way it would work, let's take a Monday through Friday, because an episode would take 5 days to do. The first day, we have the table reading. Like I explained, where all of the actors sit around the table and read the script out loud. That takes place at about 11 o'clock in the morning, and then the actors spend the rest of the afternoon just kind of getting it on its feet with the director, and the writers go back to the writer's room, and we rewrite. We go, gee, this is kind of confusing, or she drops out of the story, we need to give her more, or this scene doesn't work. And you know, the rewrite on the first day can go from 4 or 5 jokes, or the show's a little long, let's make a couple of trims, to let's throw this thing out and do something else.
Wow.
And that's happened on a couple of occasions. Those are fun weeks. So the cast is given a new script at 9 o'clock on Tuesday morning, and then they get it on its feet and work it out with the director. And then at about 4 in the afternoon, there's a run through, and the writers all come down to the stage, and we watch. They're still holding their scripts at the time. We watch a run through of the episode. And based on that, and you know, hearing from the cast or the director what they're having trouble with, what doesn't seem to work, you know, we see ourselves what doesn't seem to work. We go back to the office, and then we rewrite that night. Sometimes we're there till 7:30, and it's just a few jokes here and there. Other times we're there when the sun comes up at 6 o'clock in the morning, because we've rewritten the crap out of it. So now it's Wednesday, they get a new script. Again, we see a run through of the new material, and then we go back to the room and rewrite again. The script that the cast then gets late Wednesday night, early Thursday, is basically the script. That's the script they need to memorize. They come in, and now on Thursday, it's camera blocking. And now all of the camera guys are there, the crew and the boom mics and the makeup people and stand-ins and that sort of thing. And the director will camera block the show, which is basically choreographing the cameras, because the show is shot like a play in front of a studio audience. And while it is unfolding on the stage, cameras are moving around and getting a 2-shot and moving over and getting a single. And then a guy walks around the bar and all of a sudden another camera has to pick him up. And then a camera has to go and set for the door because Frasier's going to enter. And so it's a very complicated puzzle to camera block the show. And you're sitting in the studio audience, it unfolds and there's like a monitor overhead and you look at the monitor and okay, yeah, there's Frasier and there's Niles and okay, there's this and there, it's all there, but it's planned out. Like I said, it's very much like a Rubik's Cube.
And it's all done in the one go. That's it.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
one day. It could be a long day.
Yeah.
And then the actors go home. Sometimes we have a run through if there's still a troubled scene.
Yeah.
We need to see if there's still some rough edges somewhere, but otherwise it's like, go home and learn it.
Yeah.
And then the actors really memorize it that night. They come in on Friday at noon, and from noon to 3, they rehearse the show with the cameras.
Yeah.
So the director can fine tune some things and make sure everything is right. And then at 3 o'clock, the writers come down for a dress rehearsal. And so the cast goes through the show and the cameras are going and, the director's making notes and we're making notes. And then after each scene, the showrunner will ask the cast to come to the rail of the bleachers and give some fine tuning notes.
The cast.
That's over at about 5.
Yeah.
And then we'll still go back to the room and change a line here or there. And then at 7 o'clock, the audience comes in at 6:30 and at 7 o'clock we shoot the show.
And the half-hour show is shot. How long does it take to shoot the half-hour show?
Well, it depends. We would we'd have the audience for like 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And then after the audience left, we would take another hour or so and do pickups. But we didn't want to hold up the audience.
Yeah.
We moved at a brisk pace.
Yeah.
Friends started filming at 4 in the afternoon and would end at 1 in the morning.
Wow.
Okay. And Friends, because it was such a popular show, they had 2 audiences. They had an audience at 4 and they burned them out like at 8.
Had them in shifts.
Yeah. And they brought in a new audience. Yeah. So the answer to your question is between 2 and 8 hours.
Right. Okay. And why did you decide to move to the directing side of things from writing?
Well, it got to the point that going down for these run-throughs, I would just dread because I'm just hoping, please let this work. I don't want to be here until 5 o'clock in the morning, So I would just go down to these run-throughs and hold my breath. And I thought to myself, there's something wrong when you're a comedy writer and you don't want to go down to the stage.
Yeah.
It's like the stage is where you should be having fun. And I thought, well, the actors are having fun. The director is having fun. I'll be a director. And, I had been a showrunner long enough that I had sat through editing and torn my hair out over bad shots that directors got or shots that I needed that they didn't get. And I thought, he's making a joke about her dress and you don't have a shot of her dress. Like, what? And I was at that point kind of comfortable talking to actors. I didn't really know cameras. I really had to study cameras. But then I decided, okay, take a shot at it. And I audited Jim Burrows, Andy Ackerman, number of other directors. And so I got my shot and I did a Wings, which was my first one. It was a very difficult episode. And when I got through it, I thought, okay, if I could live through this, I could live through anything. And then I wound up, it's interesting. I love directing, and the part of it that I now like the best is the camera blocking.
Wow.
It's like once I figured out how all of that works, then it's like, you know what? It's just me and my guys, and I'm setting up shots and having a good time with them. The camera blocking is my favorite part. And I knew I had sort of crossed a line when I would prepare my camera blocking extensively. I had like little toy soldiers, and I would map out where A camera is and B camera and that sort of thing. And then I had directed maybe 10 shows by this point. And I was the showrunner of a show on CBS called Almost Perfect, starring Nancy Travis.
Yeah.
And the night before camera blocking, I get a call from the director's wife that the director had a kidney stone and was in the hospital. And I thought, well, okay, you know, we either shut down, which is going to cost us a shit ton of money, or I'll just come in and camera block it on the fly. I don't even know his blocking. I have no preparation whatsoever. And this might take 15 hours to do. And when I got down there and I watched it, and it was like, well, okay, well, it all fell into place. It's like, okay, A, you get him. B, you give me a 2-shot. C, give me a master. You give me this. Then they're going to do-see over. A, you get him. You get her. Okay, I got to pull you to go to the door to pick up his entrance. You can give me a raking master here. I need a reaction shot. So you, B camera, you know, I'm looking at the cameras and I'm going, okay, C has a better master. I don't need B. B, push in and get me a single of Nancy at this point. And I blocked the show in pretty much the same amount of time it took to block it after I had spent 7 hours preparing. And kind of that's when I knew it's like, okay. Yeah. And I still prepare though. I still do, but it takes me like an hour at home, and I don't need the men. And when I get down on the stage, something will change. You know, I'll say, okay, we'll have a single on the A camera. And the camera coordinator will go, you know, there's a better angle if you get the single on B. And it's like, okay, fine. But if I get single on B, then it throws off my whole pattern completely. And so then I have to be prepared to, again, work on the fly.
Yeah.
But as long as I know in my head what I want, you know I need a reaction shot from Nancy here.
Yeah.
And either I get it, I'll have 2 passes where I'll have 2 different assignments for the cameras. And either I get it on one of those 2 passes or mark it as a pickup and I'll get it later. But at least I knew in my head what I wanted. And I could take any episode that I directed and I could go into the editing room and I could give you a cut of the show.
Right.
Okay. Because I knew, all right, you know, I would go here, I would go here. I have a master. If I want to lose a couple of lines because we're long, I have a single on her. You could lift that. I have someone coming in a single, so I'm not married to a master. So I could move this person across the stage and no one would know. Like I said, it's complicated, but it's puzzles, and eventually you get it. And I had fun again on the stage, and I went home for dinner. So if the script was a total train wreck, I still had dinner reservations back in the days when you could go to restaurants.
Yeah. You also did a bit of acting. You were on The Simpsons. I know you were a writer on The Simpsons, but you got to appear in an episode.
I did everything on The Simpsons, Graham. I did everything on The Simpsons. I'm also kind of an amateur cartoonist. And it was an episode called Dancing Homer. Wait. You YouTube people.
There he is.
There he is. Dancing Homer, holding it up. Podcast people have no idea what I'm talking about. Held up
Ken just held up a stuffed toy of Homer. Yeah,
Yeah.
if you're listening on the podcast or on the radio.
He becomes a mascot for the minor league team, and he gets to move up to the major leagues to substitute for the capital city goofball. And I designed the capital city goofball.
You designed it? Wow.
I designed it, yeah.
Wow.
And they used my design. So it was like, oh man, there's like a cartoon character. And for the minor league team, they wanted to have an announcer. So I said, I'll announce.
You got the experience.
I got the experience. I'll do it. So I am the voice of the Springfield Isotopes.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So you're actually in The Simpsons. Can we talk about something that the Los Angeles Times called an epic blog fight? Do you know what I'm talking about? 2011?
Yeah.
Are you allowed to talk about it, or is there?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
This was Roseanne Barr. What happened?
Yeah. Here's what happened. First of all, I've had a blog for 15 years.
Great blog, too.
ByKenLevine.com. Read my blog and listen to my podcast, Hollywood and Levine. Shameless plug.
Get it in there.
You can cut them out.
I'll leave them in.
There was an article in New York Magazine, supposedly written by Roseanne Barr. And I say supposedly because it was way more articulate than she ever was.
Okay.
And she's complaining in the article about Roseanne and how they ripped her off, and that the creator, Matt Williams, took credit for it. And it was her show. And just, woe is me, woe is me. Anytime an article like that comes out, I will get readers to my blog commenting, asking me my thoughts on it. I read the article, which I thought was just a piece of shit. and so I wrote articles saying, the show is called Roseanne. Okay? How is she not getting credit? The show is called Roseanne. She owns a major part of it. She's the major creative force on the show. She's starring in a show called Roseanne. And the fact that Matt Williams took undisciplined stand-up material and shaped it into an actual television series, an actual pilot that worked, he's entitled to creator credit.
Yeah.
He's very much entitled to creator credit. And then I talked about, having known a lot of writers who have worked on the show, how absolutely horrid she was to writers. They would go through writers, it was just a revolving door. She didn't bother to learn their names. They would come down for a run through and they would have to wear signs around their necks with numbers. Okay? That's the regard that she had for writers. Women writers she treated just as badly or worse. So I write this in my blog post. She had a blog at the time, finds out about it, and writes just this scathing, it's like Donald Trump wrote a whole blog post. Okay.
Assuming Donald Trump could write a whole blog post.
Yeah, exactly. Just insane ramblings from a mad woman.
Attacking you directly?
Oh, attacking me personally.
Okay.
Yeah. Attacking me personally and saying how I was terrible to writers and I was terrible to women writers.
And where'd she get that info from?
Where does Trump get his info?
Okay.
Pulls it out of her ass. Okay.
Right.
Like none of it was true.
Yeah.
So I read this and I go, I'm not going to get into a shouting match with Roseanne. I said, I just, forget it. But a lot of women writers who worked on shows that I was producing all wrote letters, jumping to my defense.
To the Los Angeles Times, yeah.
To my blog.
To the blog, okay, yeah.
As a mentor to me, when I had my baby, Ken let me go home at 6:00 every night so that I could, feed the baby and put my baby to sleep, et cetera, et cetera. We did the show Almost Perfect, and it was me and David Isaacs and Robin Schiff. So we had a woman who was a third partner. We brought her into our partnership. So I said, I'm not going to get into, just a verbal debate, but here are what women writers have said. And like one of them had worked on Rosanne and talked about how, Ken was great, and he was a mentor, and he, never came on to us, and there was no sexual harassment or anything like that. And Rosanne was Auschwitz. So
right.
Words to that effect. Okay. So that sparked another just long, insane rant, and all of her, minions, idiots, wearing their future MAGA hats. Yeah, he's stupid. He's an asshat. I like, okay. And at that point, I wrote in the blogs, like, I'm done. Good luck with you. I'm done. And the LA Times picked up on it. I think the USA Today also picked up on it. And it sort of became this story. I think it's on my IMDb page. I think
it's on Wikipedia. It's on Wikipedia. It's on your Wikipedia page.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So
it was never resolved. It's still an ongoing thing. Then it's like North and South Korea. It's.
But let me put it to you this way, Graham. When she was going to do her comeback series,
yeah,
I was not asked to join the writing staff.
Oh, how about that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Hollywood and Levine then, which is a terrific podcast. You'd been doing the blog, as you said, for a long time. How long have you been doing the podcast now?
4 years.
4 years. So what was the inspiration? Why did you decide? Was it because of the radio background?
Yes, it was. Yeah. I had done a lot of talk radio in my day and sports talk, and I enjoy broadcasting. And I really, really lament the end of radio. And radio, I can't speak for Great Britain, but here in the United States, it's just imploding.
Yeah, and we've got problems here. A lot of consolidation. A couple of weeks ago, a lot of people.
It's just terrible. There's no live personalities anymore. Radio isn't fun. 3 giant bankrupt corporations are running 90% of the radio stations, and people are getting fired left and right. And I mean, there's no more industry per se, which breaks my heart because radio was really my first love. So I thought, okay, I'll do a podcast. I've wanted to do it for a number of years, but I am not very tech savvy and did not know, like, how would I do it? How do you get it from your recorder onto the interweb that these kids are watching these days? And a company came to me and said, we would like to partner with you. And
right.
You provide the content and they'll provide all of the technical stuff. And that's worked out great. And like I said, it's been 4 years. I tell stories like this.
Yeah.
I do a lot of interviews.
Nice one with David Isaacs. I think it was a 2-parter. It was a really good one.
Yeah, I was able to get David Isaacs. It's like amazing. Yeah, I was able to get my partner.
But it was a really nice interview there.
Thank you. But I've had Jamie Farr of MASH, and you get Alan Alda, I get Jamie Farr, and Perry Gilpin of Frasier, James Burrows for 2 episodes, for sportscaster fans, Al Michaels, who is the premier sportscaster in America. He came to the house to record it. And I also try to introduce you to writers who you don't know their names, but you know their work and you've enjoyed their work. And so I try to introduce them to various comedy writers, names that they have seen on the screen for years. And then other aspects of the entertainment industry, like a casting director or a former studio executive, a former network executive, an executive who was in charge of scheduling and programming for NBC. And then I'll do sometimes commentary tracks where I'll take an episode of like Cheers or Frasier, and you don't have to, but if you sync it up, I then just talk through and do a commentary track of what was going on behind the scenes. Look for this, and you'll notice that this isn't going to match, and stuff like that. And I tell goofy stories like this from time to time.
And you also play, if you've been out somewhere, you bring tape. Like, for instance, you had a bash at stand-up and you played that on there. Some one-act plays you've been involved with, you play them on there. And there's commentary before and after and everything. Yeah, it's a real variety of stuff, but it's all about the biz that you're in. It's a really, really good podcast.
What I've done sometimes is I'll take a 10-minute play that I wrote, and I'll play the play. Then I'll explain my thought process and why I did certain things and why I chose this reference and why I decided to tell the story this way and why I laid in this piece of information that you'll see pays off later. So I'll talk about that for like 5-10 minutes and then play the scene again. And now you have a different perspective because now you're seeing it as an insider. And it's, I think, very instructive.
Yeah, for anyone that wants to get into your line of work or anything to do in Hollywood. Yeah.
Right.
So it's Hollywood and Levine. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. You can't miss it. You shouldn't miss it. It's great. We'll find out where it is on the chart, on the podcast chart. And final question, what are you looking forward to, Ken?
Getting out of the house.
That would be good, wouldn't it? Has lockdown been good for you? Because
Yes.
as a writer, surely this is a bonus, isn't it, more than anything?
Well, it actually is, because there is a project that I'm working on, and I've been writing out of the house here, where you see, for the last few years. So I'm being productive, hopefully, but I kind of miss the independence, and I miss going to restaurants, and I miss seeing friends, and I miss being able to travel. But I'm doing okay. We get our Instacarts, and they bring the Lorna Dunes, so I'm surviving. Thank you.
I'm glad you are. May it continue for a long, long time. Ken Levine. The podcast is called Hollywood and Levine. Don't miss it. Make sure you subscribe. And thanks for being on Podcast Radio and for being on this Zoomcast.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Graham. Thanks for having me.